Okay, you are live.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome everyone to the Planning Commission meeting for September 7th. We are live and I'm going to call this meeting to order at 7:02. At this time, I'd like to introduce our recording secretary, Jen Nylander.
Hello.
So, all right, here we go. Prior to roll call, the city attorney would like to make an announcement to the Planning Commission regarding the teleconferencing of this meeting. So at this time, we will turn it over to Assistant City Attorney Alicia Poon.
Thank you, Chair Kuznick. Prior to roll call, I would like to make clear for the record of this meeting, and it should be reflected in the minutes, that the governor has issued executive orders relaxing the requirements pertaining to remote meetings under the Brown Act. The executive orders authorize this Planning Commission to hold public meetings by teleconference during the COVID-19 crisis. I previously went over the specific provisions of the Brown Act that have been temporarily amended or suspended in order to allow for this meeting to take place by teleconference, and this meeting will comply with all such provisions. Madam Recording Secretary, it would now be appropriate for you to conduct roll call, after which I would ask the chair to recognize me in order to confirm certain matters for the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. Commissioner Edwards?
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Marks?
Here.
Commissioner Wallace?
I'm here.
Vice Chair Alpert?
Here.
And Chair Kuznick?
I'm here.
Thank you.
Okay. And now, Ms. Poon, back to you.
Thank you again, Chair Kuznick. I would now like to ask the chair, the vice chair, and the other commission members 3 questions. Rather than ask you to respond separately to these questions, I will ask all 3, and if the answer is yes, please to all 3, please say yes and physically raise your hand. Question 1, can you hear me well? Question 2, have you been able to hear all previous speakers, including the roll call, clearly? Question 3, are you satisfied based on facial or voice recognition or otherwise that everyone here representing themselves to be a commission member is actually the person they are representing themselves to be? And I'm looking for hands and yeses.
Yes.
Oh, Corey, can you unmute yourself?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, seeing all hands raised, and the record should reflect that I have received affirmative answers from each commission member present to all 3 questions, that all commission members have indicated they are able to hear each other in these proceedings clearly, and no commission member has expressed doubt that each and every commission member participating by teleconference is in fact the commission member they are representing themselves to be. And finally, I would now like to advise the chair and the commission members and the recording secretary that any votes taken during the teleconference portion of this meeting must be taken by roll call. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, Jennifer, I see the American flag. If you could lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Absolutely. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Okay, we are now moving on to item 4. Item 4 is public comment or written communication. These are for items that are not on tonight's agenda. So, Jennifer, do we have some directions on public comment?
Sure, thank you. So if you would like to speak, you may click the raise your hand button on your computer or *9 on your telephone. And at this time, members of the public can address the Planning Commission on any item not on tonight's agenda.
Okay, so go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
You have more.
That was it. I was just going to say we do not have any written communication on item 4.
Thank you very much. But I'm going to open public comment. We do have, appears to have 1 hand up, so we will.
All right. And Lauren, if you wouldn't mind putting up a timer for me. All right, so our first speaker is going to be a call-in speaker. It is call-in user 1. I'm going to go ahead and allow you to speak. And we're going to get the timer going here.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, yes, we can.
Okay, so hi, commissioners. You know, you are appointed as our representatives to basically guard the planning, the development, and the well-being of our community. And I must say that when you were appointed, I know all of you are good people and mean well. However, last meeting, when you were vetting Sandbox VR or virtual reality VR, yeah, I felt that you didn't sufficiently ask enough questions that will protect our city, mainly because this business, they operate on shared devices, and none of you had asked any questions regarding how they would sanitize those devices. And when you know that they're targeting our youth as young as 12 years old, and we're in the middle of a pandemic with Delta being the variant, that a lot of our hospitals are almost at capacity. I almost want to say that I really resent that you just passed, the land use permit last time so quickly in one meeting, and you hardly asked any questions. And of all those questions I asked in my public comment, which I only have 3 minutes, not all of them were answered, and you did not insist for the applicant to address my questions. I would really like you to please, going forward, to really respect the public, and as well as our teachers. They are being really sandwiched between mandates and their personal health choices, and it's just not fair that, you know, in the middle of this, we want people to be healthy and to wear a mask and everything, but then we're allowing a new business from China that is, you don't even know how they're going to keep the kids healthy, and there is no restriction to how many hours our kids can play. And a lot of their playing is motor memory. It's very violent. I really wish that you had addressed more on those issues with Sandbox VR. Going forward, I ask you to please be mindful of my request. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let me see if we have any other speakers here. And it looks like we have no more hands raised.
All right, seeing no other items for public comment at this time, I will now close this portion of the public comments. All right, moving on to the next agenda item. Okay, item 5, additions and revisions. We have none. Item 6, consent calendar. There are no items on the consent calendar. Item 7, approval of the minutes. So is there a discussion or a motion on the last meeting's minutes?
Madam Chair, I will move approval of the minutes from the August 17th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting.
I will second.
I will second.
I got Corey first, so I'll go ahead and
That's
take
fine.
Corey as our seconder.
Yep.
All right, I'll go ahead and do a roll call vote real quick. We had mover, Commissioner Marks,
Aye.
seconder, Commissioner Edwards,
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace,
Aye.
Vice Chair Alpert,
Aye.
and Chair Kuznick.
Aye.
Thank you. Item 7.1 passes. Thank you so much.
Very good, thank you. So we move on to item 8, items continued after close of public hearing. There are none. And now we move to item 9, continued items, and we'll go to item 9.1. Okay, so this is the item 9.1, continued public hearing on the TTLC townhomes at 500 Deerwood Road. And we have a staff report by Shanae Tsukamoto, associate planner. And Shanae, I hope I did better this week.
Thank you. You did very well. Thank you.
Good.
Good evening, Chair Kurznak and member of the commissioners and the member of the public. And Jen, please promote the applicants so they are able to speak.
Yes,
anytime.
I'm working on that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. This item was discussed at the previous meeting on August 17th, and it's been continued to today, the date specific. At that previous meeting, Commissioner had some questions with regards to the applicant's response to the ARB's comments. And Commissioner wanted to see how and what items exactly the applicant responded to the ARB's comments. So applicant provided that, and then it is probably best to have the applicant describe all the details in their presentation. And the staff report summarized what they did as 6 items, so they can describe the details on that. And also the commissioner asked staff to revise the conditions of approval to include specific languages addressed in the Sql Analysis memo, more specifically the biological resource analysis language. And those languages were included in the newly revised conditions of approval number 12 and 13. And also staff revised the condition number 6 to say that Sql Analysis memo dated August 17, 2021 to be printed out on the front sheet of the building permit set. And by the way, the data of the Sql Analysis memo stated in the staff report as well as the condition number 6 being incorrect. It is spelled out as August 7, 2021, but that date needs to be revised to August 17, 2021. And thank you, Mr. Commissioner Alpert, for finding this inconsistency. So I appreciate that. And also, staff provided a DRC, that's a Development Review Committee comments from the outside agencies. That's part of the record for this application. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Kelly, the applicant, to speak the project from their point of view. And then I have a slide presentation to share on behalf of them. So she can present the PowerPoint. Kelly, can you see the presentation?
I do. Yes,
Right.
thank you.
There you go. It is all yours now.
Okay, wonderful. Good evening, Chair Kuznick and Planning Commissioners. It's good to be back here again tonight to share additional information on the Deerwood project. I'm going to just go through these slides sort of quickly, and then I hope to answer any questions that you have at the end. Shinya, if you can go to the next slide. There we go. Just as a refresher of the site, located at 500 Deerwood Road, part of the San Ramon Valley specific plan, San Ramon Village, excuse me, specific plan, adjacent to the storage facility and the Cortese property to the east. Next slide, please. A rendering of the Paseo and the open space. Next slide, please. Okay, and so here we have our overview and revisions, and there are additional adjustments that were made that are not going to be reflective on this specific page that I will go through in subsequent slides. But starting out, I'd like to just note that the Architecture Review Board asked that we create a more sense of entry to the space upon arrival. So we have added a monument and a tree and additional planting. Thank you, Shanae. Right there in the corner, as well as the concrete stairs and handrail for pedestrian connectivity. That was a request of the ARB that we decided to facilitate as well. Moving upwards, The seating between buildings 5 and 6, the diameter was reduced. ARB felt that it was just a little bit too large and intrusive into the adjacent buildings, so that area was reduced. And then moving along over to our open space, if you recall, this is an adjustment that we made based on Planning Commission session that we had in August, concerns about the natural gas fire pit. So we have replaced that fire pit with just a faux fire pit. It's just going to be some rocks and no natural gas lighting, no fires, no heat, but just a nice common area to sit at and kind of congregate in more of a little private setting. Next slide, please. So here we just kind of give a little bit more detail of potentially what the entry will look like with the monument, the trees, and the planting. Next slide, please. And here's the visual, just as I mentioned before, of the reduction in diameter of the seating area pavement between buildings 5 and 6. Next slide. Okay, so this is not, reflective on the site details, but this is some feedback. The ARB, they asked for a little bit of revision and change in color to the garage doors and the siding. So if you can see on the left, the garage doors are kind of a yellowish hue. We have made an adjustment to a darker color to kind of break up the coloring. We also are showing changes to the porches and balconies. If you can kind of see the materials on the balconies, it was a wood horizontal material, and now it has been changed out to a metal, more durable material. And then also, oh, there it is. Yes. But if you just go back to the previous one for one moment, please, Shinye. Sorry, thank you. And then we did also add the roof sheds on plan 2. So the gables stayed on plan 1, but if you go to the left, Shinye, the little tiny flat roof sheds. Can you see it over on the picture to the right on the front elevation? Yeah, okay. So those are some of the additional revisions based on ARB. Next slide, please. Oh, well, I apologize for the blurry photo, but that was the metal material for the balconies that was changed. And then, as I mentioned before, the previous plans showed the natural gas fire pit. We have replaced that with a faux fire bowl. Next slide, please. And at this point, I'm happy to continue on. I have additional slides where you go through one by one on the ARB comments and responses. I'm happy to do that, although I think you received this ahead of time, so you may have had a chance to review it. Completely up to you. So for now, this is my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any additional questions you all may have.
Excuse me, thank you. So commissioners, do you, this is an opportunity to ask the applicant any clarifying questions on either what we received as part of the agenda or what was presented at this moment? No questions? Okay. I do have two very quickly. So Kelly, one of the things was this issue about the turf blocks in the roadway, and at least what I saw, has that been amended?
Oh, sorry. Were you saying something?
I'm sorry. Yes. So in the plans, the fire department said that you could not use the grass turf for the part of the roadway over by the natural area, the south side. I wondered if that has been amended in the plans.
No, that has not been amended. Based on what fire mentioned, is that they were okay with what we had laid out in the plans, was my impression. Is that something that was not your interpretation of in the plans?
I will look that up, but
yeah,
it was one of those
on our last planning commission meeting. I think he said he was fine with that.
Okay, all right.
Right.
And that is up to the fire department, so that I'll just note that. And then the question, I know I asked the question about lighting in the south side, the nature area there, and whether or not you had thought about adding some lighting to that.
Yes, that was a great question. And we will be doing a photometrics plan further down the road. So that is something that will be addressed at that time.
All right,
Yes.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Other commissioners, any other questions at this time? All right, so at this time then, seeing no further clarifying questions, we will take a moment to open for public comment. So, Jen?
Thank you. We did not receive any written communication for item 9.1, but if you'd like to speak, you may raise your hand, click the raise your hand button or *9 on your telephone to speak for item 9.1. And through the chair, I do not currently see any hands raised.
I concur, and therefore I'm going to.
Oh, got one. Okay, so I have one speaker. I'll go ahead and let him or her speak. We have an Aaron Garrettson.
I think it's Ian.
Or Ian, I'm sorry, Ian Garrettson.
Hello, this is Ian Garrettson. I'm a resident here at in Center Ramon. I just wanted to voice that I think that we should move forward with getting this built. Every minute that we spend reviewing this, it just increases the cost on the residents of Center Ramon. So I think that we should get it built sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so let me go ahead and see if we have any other speakers here. I don't see any hands raised.
I agree. And so we will close public comment on this item. And now, commissioners, it's up to, we are moving forward on our part of this discussion. Or is there a motion, or should we, do you have any other comments at this time? All right, I'm looking for hands because I'm trying to be way more attentive to that. Okay.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to adopt the resolution number 03-21, approving the project.
So we have a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and do a roll call vote. We had mover, Commissioner Edwards.
Aye.
Commissioner Marks, seconder.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Wallace.
Before I vote, I had a question. Are we voting to adopt the resolution as is? Or are we really moving to have a discussion of the resolution? Because I had a couple comments on the text of the resolution. So I'd like the motion clarified.
My understanding the motion was to adopt.
That's correct.
So are you putting forward a separate motion? So this is getting more complicated, folks.
Yeah, I mean, normally what we do is we have a vote to go ahead and discuss the resolution and conditions of approval. And at the end of that discussion, then we vote on adopting it. I don't know that I've ever, in the last 3 years, ever approved a resolution without ever having discussion as to whether anybody had comments on the resolution or the conditions of approval.
Madam Chair, I
Yes.
took the silence that ensued after you asked if there was a motion to mean that most people didn't have anything. Assuming that Corey doesn't have any concerns, I think Eric is right. Maybe we do a quick page by page and then go back into the resolution.
Okay. Staff, do I need can I do that?
You need to amend the motion, and I would recommend that you just open it up to discussion, and rather than page by page, perhaps we can just focus on the questions that the commissioners might have.
Okay. So we will, go ahead, Corey, you look like you were ready to say something.
Well, I think based on the comments that we're hearing, I think perhaps the right thing to do is to withdraw the motion.
So noted.
Then let me make a motion to have a discussion on the resolution 03-21.
Do we have a second?
I will second Commissioner Wallace's motion.
Okay, so we had mover Commissioner Wallace.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Seconder Vice Chair Alpert,
Aye.
Commissioner Edwards,
Aye.
Commissioner Marks,
Aye.
and Chair Kuznick.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Wallace, you have some concerns.
I have two. They're not make or break, but there's two parts of the resolution that I had a problem with. If we go on the bottom of packet page 16, item F, which is one of the waivers, and this has to do with the 15-foot grade, the wall. I'm not opposed to the waiver, but the way it's structured is that it would make the project financially infeasible. The problem I have is that there was no testimony or evidence about the financial wherewithal of this project or the impact of the layered or the terraced wall on the project. Now, there was testimony that to put in a terraced retaining wall would make the project physically infeasible because there's no way you could put the buildings where they are if you had to step back the wall. So what I propose to do is to take out the construction costs and put language in there that basically says that it's physically unfeasible to develop the project without the waiver. The second point was the next point. Again, it's a waiver. I'm not opposed to the waiver, but it had to do with the city's retaining wall. The problem that I saw about this is that since the city owns the retaining wall, there was no way for the applicant to make the cutouts because they don't have the ability to do that in the city wall. So I would just change the language to make it clear that it is physically unfeasible to do the cutouts because of the presence of the retaining wall. Those are the two comments I had. I just wanted to make the record clear as to what the problems are, and I thought the language I proposed, at least the concepts, were more in keeping with the testimony that we've heard over the past two public meetings.
So, Lauren, would we have enough from that to make that adjustment as noted tonight?
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we can craft the language to respond to the comments. I think they're pretty straightforward. So you could do a motion as amended.
Okay, so let me get to Corey because she has her hand up. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think I just want to just respond to Commissioner Wallace's comments. I do believe that we talked about the 15-foot retaining wall, and I do recall there being comments from the project sponsor that there was economic issues associated with the 15-foot retaining wall, and that they had looked at alternate designs. And the terracing of the retaining wall was something that was problematic because they were going to lose too much site. Lose too much of the site to the terracing. Regarding the city's retaining wall, I'm not sure that it's a matter of physical infeasibility. I know that in my practice, we often reach agreements with the owners of adjacent improvements and so forth. I don't know whether the project sponsor has requested permission to do cut-throughs for the retaining wall or not. But I'm less inclined to include language in this resolution that discuss things like physical infeasibility, because I'm just not sure we have the evidence to support that.
Okay. That is an interesting question. we have comments on that to
Let me make
answer.
Let me make
Okay.
a suggestion.
Thank you.
On item GF, which is the grade, just strike out everything on the second line on the top of page 17 after the word change through the word proposed project. So it reads, by requiring terraced 4-foot retaining walls to make up for the 15-foot grade change, the project would become infeasible. And just leave it at that.
Okay. Does that meet? Does that satisfy the rest of the commission? You can nod. We find that suitable. Okay. All right. Thank you, Commissioner Wallace. Other discussion points of this particular resolution before we move on any other portion of it?
Okay, I would move adoption of resolution 03-21 as amended.
Is there a second?
I will second the motion.
Okay, I'll do a roll call vote. We had mover Commissioner Wallace,
Aye.
seconder Vice Chair Alpert,
Aye.
Commissioner Edwards,
Aye.
Commissioner Marks,
Aye.
and Chair Kuznick.
Aye.
Thank you. Item 9.1 passes as amended.
Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, and to our applicant, we look forward to seeing the project. All right, we will move on to item 9.2, the continued public hearing on City Village. And we have a staff report by Ms. Cindy Yee, Senior Planner. Cindy.
Thank you and good evening, commissioners and members of the public. I have a staff report, really brief presentation to provide you this evening, and then I'll turn it over to the applicant so that they can also share a presentation that they've provided. So let me go ahead and just get us started here. So tonight will be the third public hearing on the City Village project. Our request this evening is to continue the public hearing, receive additional public testimony, as well as feedback from the Planning Commission, and then continue this public hearing to September 21st. So just to, again, get us oriented with the project is bound by Norris Canyon Road, Camino Ramon, and Executive Parkway, a 31-acre site that has a mix of townhomes and single-family units. It's located at Bishop Ranch 6, commonly referred to within the Bishop Ranch Business Park. The site currently has three three-story office complexes on the property, which would be demolished and replaced with 404 residential units. It's at a density of approximately 18.5 dwelling units per acre. Along with the residential development would be a 2-acre park site and a tot lot located within the interior of the project area. There's also an affordable housing proposal as part of this project. It is being requested as part of this project, a specific plan amendment to the North Camino Ramon specific plan. The site currently has a BRMU designation, Bishop Ranch mixed use. The proposal is to change that to a mixed use density residential, as well as update associated sections of the specific plan, including the inclusionary housing ordinance, as well as text to align with the project. There's also a development plan application, a major subdivision application, architectural review, tree removal, and environmental review applications. So as you recall, this project is subject to Measure G requirements for specific plan amendments. It requires a minimum of 3 public hearings before the Planning Commission and City Council, and it requires a 4/5 vote of the City Council after a recommendation by the Planning Commission in favor of the amendment. The project is also subject to the California Environmental Quality Act. It requires analysis of the environmental impacts, which has been done and provided in attachment A to your staff report this evening, and addendum to the original environmental impact report prepared for the specific plan. So quite a few bullets on this slide, but it's basically identifying the various key steps with this project. We've had several study sessions with the City Council, with the Planning Commission, with the Parks and Community Services Commission, Housing Advisory Committee, Architecture Review Board, and as I mentioned, tonight is the 3rd public hearing. We've had a first public hearing was a joint session with the City Council and Planning Commission back in July. In August, we continued the public hearing to tonight's meeting to further the conversation about the project, and expecting to have an additional public hearing with the Planning Commission scheduled for September 21st. So generally, the feedback that we've received thus far, the proposed amendment to the North Camino Road specific plan seems in line with the requirements for land use, site design, density range. There was general support for the number of units proposed in the mix of residential types. There was quite a bit of discussion regarding the 2-acre park and the location, the size, the long-term maintenance and responsibilities for the park. And then some additional questions that were raised at the previous meetings to request staff to provide some additional analysis of the impacts of the project to traffic, schools, water, retail uses, and affordable housing. So I will start with the Sql Analysis Summary. The addendum that was provided to you this evening was prepared as in addition to the North Camino Ramon Specific Plan, EAR, and analyzing the potential impacts of the project to the environment. Ultimately, the addendum concluded that there's no substantial changes proposed by the project or under the circumstances in which the project would be undertaken would require major revisions to the previously adopted EIR. The applicant has agreed to comply with all the applicable mitigation measures from the previous EIR as well as the addendum, and therefore the addendum is an appropriate document to meet the Sql requirements for compliance with this project. So in the staff report, there is analysis related to each of the impacts that the commission requested staff to evaluate further. And this is just a summary that in terms of school, water, and traffic impacts, each of those agencies responsible for providing that service, as well as our city's traffic engineer, has determined that there's adequate schools capacity, adequate water capacity, and no new impacts associated with this project than what was can be mitigated or was previously analyzed in the EIR. And in fact, the project does actually decrease the total number of vehicular trips on the site by a little over 2,000 daily trips as a result of the land use change from the office use to a residential use. And then in terms of the inclusionary policy, as we've discussed previously, the North Camino Ramon specific plan currently has an inclusionary policy that was adopted in 2012. Since that time, the city has adopted a new inclusionary housing ordinance that is applied citywide. And the proposal as part of this application would be to align the North Camino Ramon Specific Plan inclusionary policy with the citywide inclusionary housing ordinance. The proposal would require that multifamily units provide 15% for sale units to very low, and moderate income households with a 30-year deed restriction. Just providing a breakdown of how the applicant's proposed affordable housing plan identifies those units to be divided up. I should note, this table is a change from your staff report. When we looked at the numbers were not totally on the sides with the table. And so this hopefully will clarify that the total number of very low units remains 4, and the low income units remain 6, but the breakdown of the 3 bedrooms and 4 bedrooms, just now the totals line up both top and bottom rows. So the applicant's proposals for 20 units to be set aside based on this inclusionary policy. And then in terms of single family detached units, the proposal would pay an in lieu fee equivalent to 10% of the single family development's total livable square footage, approximately almost $960,000. So on July 6th, the Planning Commission had some discussion regarding the applicant's proposed affordable housing plan. One of the discussions that had come up was whether or not the city would be better served receiving a fee in lieu of on-site construction of affordable units. And the staff report goes into some detail about the goals of the inclusionary policy and trying to align with state housing law, and that while the cities and the state's policies does put an emphasis on increasing production of housing units, if the commission were to adopt an alternative affordable housing plan, staff would recommend that the commission consider a hybrid approach, where the most needed housing types in the city, the very low and the low income units, would continue to be constructed on site. So those 4 very low and the 6 low units would be constructed on site. But if we were to fee out a portion of the project, we would recommend feeing out the 10 moderate income units. And this would be an alternative to what the applicant has already proposed to set aside 20 affordable units. This would be in addition to the payment of the in lieu fee for the single family units, but in addition to that $960,000 fee payment, we would also be looking at either a $1.7 million contribution to the Affordable Housing Fund or a $2 million contribution, depending on at what point in time that fee is paid. And then the last piece of analysis was related to the park. As we've had several discussions with the Planning Commission, with the City Council, and with the Parks Commission regarding the park and the maintenance. And the city had an opportunity to look closer at how we could resolve the concerns raised about long-term maintenance of the park and the responsibilities of a private entity paying for the long-term use of this park by the public. And so staff is recommending that the city take ownership of the park after the construction of the park. The HOA would still, through an agreement with the city, maintain the stormwater infrastructure that's inside the park. But ultimately, it would become a public park that the city would be responsible for programming, for maintaining. If we can address any programming or concerns about maintenance through the city's normal process of addressing citizens' concerns. So by putting it, the maintenance for the city to be responsible for, it does take that unknown concern about how much costs would be for the HOA if they were to try to maintain this park long term. And then, so just to recap, we're here this evening to just take additional feedback and testimony from the public and planning commission. And we'd be recommending a continuation to September 21st. Ultimately, this project will take sort of 2 steps in terms of its approval. The planning commission will be making a recommendation on the specific plan amendment to the city council. The city council will then take action on the specific plan amendment, and then the entitlement applications such as the development plan, the major subdivision, architecture review, would then return back to the planning commission as the decision-making body on the entitlement of the project. And we would recommend continuing that to date certain, but we won't need to make that decision on what date until we get a recommendation from the planning commission on the recommendation of the specific plan to the city council. So we can hold off on the date certain until the September 21st meeting, but that's kind of the process in which we would expect is a 2-step approval. First step would be specific plan recommendation, and then coming back to the planning commission for project approval. Should the council decide to approve the specific plan, I should say. So the 4th public hearing on September 21st would satisfy the Measure G requirements for the minimum of 3 public hearings. And then we would go back to city council, and then should we get to the point where the specific plan is adopted, we would then come back to the planning commission for entitlement approval. So that concludes my presentation this evening. I know the applicant also has a presentation that they'd like to provide. I can certainly take questions now, or we can hold off. Perhaps maybe the applicant slides might help with some of the questions that you might have for staff.
Great. I think unless someone has objections, that we can see the presentation from the applicant.
All right, thank you. Cindy, thank you, Cindy. Before we start, could you also add Kevin Ibrahimi as a speaker?
I did try to add Kevin, and for some reason, I think he has to allow himself to be promoted, but I tried to add him a couple of times, so I'll try to put him in again.
All right, thank you, Jennifer.
Yes, no problem.
So good evening, Chair Kuznick and Planning Commissioners. I'm Denise Cunningham, Vice President of Development with Summerhill Homes. And I'd like to thank you again for your time this evening, and also thank staff for their ongoing efforts. Tonight, we also have Robert Freed, Summerhill's CEO, Kevin Ibrahimi, the Senior VP of Development, and Jerry Engen with Sunset Development, as well as our design team. And we are all available to answer any questions tonight. Next slide, please. So as Cindy had mentioned, this is our 10th public meeting for City Village. So I will begin with a brief overview and really focus most of my presentation on addressing comments from the previous meetings. Next slide, please. So the property is located on the west side of Camino Ramon between Norris Canyon and Executive Parkway, with the transit center and the Iron Horse Trail right across the street, providing easy access to transit, shopping, and retail. Next slide. And the proposed community includes a total of 404 for-sale homes with 3 unique product types. Next slide. We have the attached townhomes, and you can see the key map on the bottom right. These are located at Norris Canyon and Camino Ramon. Next slide. Thank you. These are the detached row homes. Again, you can see the key map at the bottom, and these are located along Camino Ramon and also face the entire southern edge of the park. Next slide, please. And we have the court homes. These are single family detached homes that surround a shared motor court. Again, the key map on the bottom shows that these are primarily on the western edge of the property. All of the homes in the community have generous decks and or private yards. And this mix of housing really provides for a wide range of buyer preferences. Next slide. Some of our sustainability features include a level 2 EV chargers for guests and also EV ready garages for residents. We have solar energy systems and tankless water heaters and smart thermostats in the homes. The landscaping will either meet or exceed the city's landscaping ordinance with native plants and other climate appropriate low water use landscaping and planting zones. And automatic weather-based irrigation systems. In addition, where feasible, recycled water will be used for landscaping in the park area and along the perimeter. Next slide, please. And as part of the project, we're proposing a new 2-acre public park as identified in the specific plan. And this is at the corner of Camino Ramon and Executive Parkway. A neighborhood park in this location is an amenity for the new buyers and also the surrounding community. This location was selected in consensus with city staff because it balances visibility and convenient public access for the residents and the surrounding community. And it also engages the project with the neighborhood by providing some shared open space. It also complements the city's vision for the walking district by providing gathering points for people along the new public paths that will flow around and through the site. And this also offers a convenient public space for the nearby office park. And as originally proposed, Summerhill proposed that the park be a public park, but privately owned and maintained. And based on comments received by the Planning Commission and staff, Summerhill has updated our application to include dedication of the 2-acre park to the city for ownership and maintenance. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the early conceptual ideas for the park. We have since received feedback from the Parks Commission and really with the direction to focus more on pedestrian connectivity with more passive features and sensory activities and some art features in the park as well. And so Summerhill will continue to work with the Parks Commission and staff on the final programming for the park. Next slide, please. So, and one of the comments at the last meeting, we were asked how the proposed specific plan amendments would affect other plan areas beyond the project site. And really, with the exception of the proposed amendment to the affordable housing provisions to make the specific plan consistent with the city's new inclusionary housing ordinance, the additional proposed amendments are related to design standards and zoning that really apply just specifically to the project site and not the broader area. Next slide. Additionally, at the previous meeting, we were asked whether Summerhill would be open to making a contribution to the city's affordable housing fund in lieu of providing the 20 affordable towns on site. And so in response to this, we work with our finance team and also our lenders to develop some potential alternatives. And we work with the staff on what would be an appropriate substitution providing this hybrid program. And while we continue to believe that the city's inclusionary housing ordinance requiring 20 of the townhomes to be built on site, we think this will maximize the city's affordable housing program. But if the city prefers, in lieu of providing the 10 moderate household income level towns, Summerhill's open to paying the fee to the city to their affordable housing program. And our proposal is outlined in greater detail in the staff report, and we're happy to answer any questions. And next slide, please. So I'd like to close by highlighting again the substantial public benefit of this project and what it will provide for the overall community. The development generates over $17 million of financial contributions and fees that benefit the city, plus 20 new affordable housing units. Next slide. And this provides additional much needed housing in the downtown core, near transit, retail, and consistent with the city's vision for the city core. Next slide. So in addition to it implements the vision of the walking district with landscape walking paths and gathering nodes throughout the entire community, along the perimeter, the interior, and also through the park. Next slide, please. And again, providing a new turnkey to Acre Park for the overall community. So again, we thank you for your time this evening. It's really been a collaborative effort, and we appreciate everyone's participation and comments over the last 8 months. We've come a long way, and we appreciate your support. And we're available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Cindy, do we have other members of the applicant's team that need to address us at this point?
No, I think that just the presentation from Denise this evening, and then the other members of the team are available to answer questions as they come.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So commissioners, at this time, do you have clarifying questions before we get to, yes, I see Eric has hand. Thank you. Please, Commissioner Wallace, getting better at this.
Thank you. I actually had questions for both staff and the applicant. Let me start with the applicant. Ms. Cunningham, I had a couple questions for you. The first has to do with the hybrid affordable housing issue. I just want to make clear that is Summerhill prepared to agree to a hybrid proposal whereby the very low and low income units get built out and sold, and then the moderate income units get fee-outed?
Yeah, that is consistent with the proposal we have before you.
Okay, next question on the same subject. The numbers that were in the staff report were $1.7 million upfront versus $2 million over time as the units get built out. What I'd like to know is the methodology you used to arrive at the $1.7 million figure.
Well, what we asked when we were asked to come up with some sort of fee out proposal, we asked our finance group internally, the CFO, to work with our lenders and really calculate what that number would be. And that's how we arrived at that number. The 1.7 would be if we were to pay at final map. The $2 million would be from proceeds with each sale of the home.
Okay, that tells me from a 30,000 foot level what you did, but I'm looking for a little more detail, and let me make it more specific. You're proposing to pay in lieu fees as opposed to building the 10 moderate income units. What was the methodology you used to come up with $1.7 million as opposed to say 2.2 million?
Well, again, I would just reiterate that we are, Summerhill supports building all 20 units on site. And in response to the city's questions we received previously, we wanted to look at how we would structure some sort of fee out on part of the site, this hybrid proposal. And again, this is the cost of money and working with the lenders and the finance group. And beyond that, the methodology is really left to our finance people. So that is the proposal before you. And I see Robert Freed has his hand up.
Good evening, commissioners. A little more detail. There is a difference between a fee and a project cost as it relates to how we finance the project. So a fee is treated differently by our lenders. It changes the amount of equity we put in. Equity is a cost to us. We have to get a return on that equity. So something that seems like a rather simple question becomes a little more convoluted when you actually get into the details, but we'd also be happy to provide staff with some more spreadsheets about the analysis if that would be helpful. But we thought this was, this resulted in a fairly in-depth analysis working with both our lenders and our internal staff.
I'm sure that you did not throw a dart against the wall to pick out the number. I was just trying to wrap my hands around the methodology that was used to arrive at it, because, you know, I'd sort of done a back of the envelope calculations to figure out what the subsidy was on these units. And I just wanted to see what your numbers look like. But
yeah, and part of it deals with the difference, as you might imagine, between the 1.7 and the 2 is really the timing of the payment. If we're delaying the payment, that's advantageous to us. And then there is, as I said, a difference between a fee or a project cost, because we can finance the project cost differently than the fee. Okay. At the risk of stepping out of bounds in terms of editorial comment, I do think the city could, in fact, provide more benefits to the community by letting us fee out on the moderate, because I think that leverage of that money probably could help more families than 10 of the moderate units that we build. And that's my opinion based on the fact that I've been involved in affordable housing for 25 years and in another capacity outside of Summerhill.
yeah, and I don't disagree as a general statement what you just said, and that's why it was brought up at one of our early meetings to come up with an approach where there were some fees paid in lieu of building the actual unit. So I think from that standpoint, you know, we sort of have the same goal in mind, which is to maximize the return to the city for affordable housing. Okay, the next question, and again, this is probably a yes or, I'm sorry,
Eric, can I, Cindy, you raised your hand. I wondered if you had a comment on, before Eric goes on to his next question.
Yeah, I probably just wanted to also point out that if we were to apply the city's current fee schedule on how we calculate price per square foot, and were to fee out a moderate income unit, the city hired a consultant to do a development fee study some years ago. And as part of that study, that's the basis of our currently adopted inclusionary housing fee, which is about $15 a square foot. That's what we used to calculate the single family costs. So if you were to take that same $15 a square foot calculation, base that, even if we were to say 10 moderate units at the upper range of 3,000 square foot per unit, you're looking at a fee that would equate to a little less than $500,000, so closer to $450,000. If we were to use the same formula that we typically would use to fee out, like we're doing with the single family component of this project. So just to give you a sense of how that relates to the city's current fee schedule.
Thank you.
Okay, so
I had one more question for the applicant, and I just want to make sure that I understood it. As you know, during the last couple of meetings, the 2-acre park has been a subject of a fair amount of discussion. I just want to make sure that I understand this correctly. What your current proposal is to develop basically a turnkey 2-acre park and turn it over to the city?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. I did have some questions of staff, but I'll defer that until everybody gets a chance to cross-examine the applicant.
Okay, all right. Other commissioners, questions for the applicant? I don't see a hand, so, oh yeah, Commissioner Marks, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to discuss and get a better understanding of A Street. The first time we saw this project, I think it was in March, I was at least not aware that there was a public access easement on A Street, but during the July joint session with the City Council, I believe that was announced. And so this is really my first opportunity to understand this a little better. The ownership of this street will require that the HOA pay for all future repairs for what is functionally a public street. People will be walking across or through it. They need to access it to get to the parking lot that serves the park. It occurs to me that that's an unusual situation to invite the public in to a private street. Costs are paid for by a homeowners association. I don't know if there's anything like that in the city. I certainly haven't seen that in my experience as a planner. I also have a question, and that is, what kind of liability insurance and exposure are we exposing the HOA to? For instance, people are driving on A Street and there's a car accident. And whoever was a participant in the accident alleges that there was something faulty about the street, the maintenance, the design, whatever. The homeowners association is going to have to defend itself or potentially have to defend itself as the owner of the street, especially if there's something that someone alleges was a design flaw. As an example, I once worked for a city where somebody drove into a light standard, claimed that the light standard was in the wrong location, and sued the city. And while they did not prevail, there were expenses that the city incurred along the way. And so I'm wondering, what kind of insurance liability, by making this a street with a public access easement over it, are we exposing the HOA to? And I wonder if someone on Summerhill's team could answer that.
Yeah, I'm happy to respond to that, Commissioner Marks. It's really not unusual, particularly over the last several years, for HOAs to own private streets, sidewalks with public easements over it. It's become much more commonplace with cities not wanting to retain that cost and responsibility for that. And so the HOAs are equipped to manage that, and they do carry insurance.
Well, I understand that, but I'm concerned about the cost of the insurance, and I'm concerned about if there is a claim and it goes to court, there are costs along the way that the HOA has to bear. What I'm getting at ultimately is, since people are going to be invited to walk through it, drive on it, and access the parking lot from it, why not just make A Street a public street? Other than passing costs along to an HOA, what is the advantage to anybody of having this as a private street rather than a public street? All the other streets could be private streets coming off of A Street, which is commonly done. Why is this going to be a private street with a public access easement? I don't know, maybe that's a question for staff, and I don't mean to put Ms. Cunningham on the spot, but I would like to understand why we are doing that.
That's something that we could discuss with staff, unless Cindy wanted to respond right now. We could explore that.
Yeah, and if I could, Kevin and Brahim, if I could add to that, again, Commissioner Marks, it's very typical in almost every project that we do that we provide public access easement to, whether it's within the roadway or a trail system, or any component of the project. As Denise was pointing out, majority of jurisdictions now prefer to have private roadways and private developments so that the cities don't get burdened with the maintenance responsibilities. So that's the primary reason that we wind up doing. And again, we're open, as Denise pointed out, to work with staff, but that's primarily the reason.
I'm very familiar with private streets, and I worked in a city where we had dozens, if not hundreds of them. What I don't think is, at least understood by me, is when you are asking or inviting, I should say, the general public to drive over the street to access a public park or walk along the street, you are exposing them to some liability. If it's so common, perhaps you can come back at the next meeting and give us an idea of what are the insurance costs? What are the liability costs that we are exposing this homeowners association to? And I would ask city staff to talk with our public works department. Why is it a benefit to the city to have A Street other than the costs? Why not make it just a private street? Here's another question on a totally different topic. But this is a question for staff, and if you want, I can wait until every other commissioner has had a chance to talk with the applicant.
I think you're on a roll here, so go with it.
Okay.
I see no other hands right now.
Okay. I'm now talking about the specific plan amendment. And it's my understanding that subsections A, A1, C, and perhaps D of the Sql guidelines, section 15378, defines what a project is under Sql. And that includes amendments to a general plan and, by extrapolation, a specific plan, as well as to a zoning ordinance. What I don't see is, while I have tried to read all of the attachments that we got last week, I haven't read them all, but I've read 5 of them, and none of them discuss the proposed amendments to the specific plan that are being put forward by Summerhill. Further, there are no specific plan amendments put forward by the staff, which is curious to me. And lastly, the Planning Commission has not even been given a chance to put forward any kind of proposed amendment. But what I'm wondering about is, how do you amend a general plan, or I should say a specific plan, where 23 changes to it have not been analyzed? How do you sequentize it when the Planning Commission has not even reviewed it? We are told that this is the 3rd meeting, including the amendments to the plan, but in none of the staff reports, in none of the staff presentations, have we discussed any of these amendments. I don't know where other commissioners are relative to these amendments. I really am not sure where I am. I haven't had a chance to ask the staff what the impacts of those will be on adjacent properties, on other properties in group G or area G. It seems to me that the documents that I have read do a very good job of reviewing the project itself, the 404 homes project, and I have no objection with that. But none of them address the specific plan amendments. I do not see how this could be meeting number 3, and I do not see how the work that has been done in any way covers the specific plan amendments. Part of what we're going to have to do is find consistency with the general plan to any of the amendments that are made to the specific plan. And we are going to have to make findings to that effect. How do you make findings when there's nothing in the record that discusses any of this? How do you make findings that say that plan change 23 or 22 is consistent for the following reasons when that hasn't been discussed. So I do not at this point believe that the plan itself has been discussed through CEQA, because the plan itself has not been discussed. And lastly, I would point out again that while these may be all of the amendments that Summerhill wants, and they look generally reasonable at a first read, I was expecting there would be a staff analysis of each and anything that the staff thought the plan ought to do. And I was thinking that there would be a document, even just a checklist, that went over what the plan was proposing, and doing an environmental review on that. A glaring omission from this is the walking district. The city has spent a lot of time talking about a walking district. I think we have a consultant on board. In fact, I participated in an online effort about 2 months ago, where the general public was asked to weigh in on a number of walking district issues. This is the time to include the walking district in the North Camino Ramon specific plan. And to the extent possible at this time, where it will be located, the amenities or features that we are looking to include, the obligation of property owners whose property is included in the walking district, and when those obligations need to be met, supporting maps and graphics to the extent we can right now, and any special features. But again, are we contemplating that we will amend the plan now, and then when the walking district is done, we will hope that we haven't damaged the prospects for the walking district by approving a large project beforehand? The strategy here, the timing here, the comprehensiveness of what we are doing with the specific plan amendments escape me. And at some point, I would like the staff to let me know, what do you think of what I'm saying? And how do you justify doing the specific plan CEQA work before any discussion of the amendments has occurred?
So, Lauren, you have your hand up. I think you want to comment.
Yeah, I just want to touch briefly on the walking district and the role that the walking district master plan plays for the community as a whole. It is a standalone document that's being developed, and it's a series of guidelines that relate to the vision for the walking district. It was never intended to be adopted by ordinance into the specific plan. If that's something that the policymakers would like to pursue, that's in and above the scope of work for the walking district guidelines. Again, we're looking for opportunities. I would also add that the applicant has participated in those same design charrettes and workshops and is doing what they can to further the goals of the walking district's master plan. It's very similar in the same way that a bike master plan rolls out for the community. It's again, it's a guiding document, but it's not adopted by ordinance per se. So
that's information I did not know about, Lauren. I thought it was going to be a part of the North Camino Ramon plan, and so I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, it will be a standalone document. If people want to adopt those standards in the future by ordinance, that's something else. There's a lot of constraints, right-of-way issues that make being prescriptive standard very difficult to enforce. So at this point, it's more guidelines and working with development applications to implement the vision. Anyway, with regard to the questions related to CEQA, we'll take a closer look at that. Again, the project applicant has put forward a proposal to accommodate a development proposal through revisions to the specific plan. And again, those are inherent in the design that they put forward, but we can look a little bit more closely at that.
I would appreciate it because they are two separate actions. Some of the documents I read use the term city village project, and they seem to be including both, but in fact, they're not the same. The plan is separate from the city village project. The city village project is subservient to whatever the plan comes up with. And I don't see again how you can adopt this set of plan amendments or other ones that might come forward without a discussion. Let me proceed to two other very quick questions. I read the biological resources supporting information document, and in it there was a January 28th letter to Justin Hugh of Summerhill Apartment Communities from Katrina Krakow of Live Oak Associates, in which she offers 3 mitigation measures, MM1, MM2, and MM3. If you turn to packet page 196, there's a table that talks about biology, and MM1 is included, but MM2 and 3 are not. And I wonder why that is. And the same sort of thing with the cultural and tribal cultural resources document. There's a letter to Mr. Hugh from Candace Erringer of ESA, offering 3 mitigation measures, CL1, CL2, and CL3. And on packet page 202 in the table, CL1 is identified and put forward. There's an unidentified CL4, which is not in the letter that was sent to Mr. Hugh, and CL2 and 3 are not included. And so while I don't expect an answer tonight, it would be helpful at the next hearing in September or wherever it occurs, if there could be either some explanation or those corrections could be made. Those are my questions at this point. I'll have some comments later on, Ms. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Chair Alpert, or excuse me, Vice Chair Alpert, do you have questions for the applicants at
I
this
don't
time?
think they're applicant questions. Maybe they're questions for staff. And although I want to just echo what Commissioner Wallace brought up around the arithmetic that led to the 1.7 million, interested in that as well. And then similar questions as Commissioner Marks on the process for reviewing and making recommendations on the specific plan amendments, and without going and repeating it. But the questions I actually had for staff, it's discussed at in the staff report, there's a notification. Could you clarify who all was notified? It was 300 feet within the plan area. Was it everybody that's in the North Camino Ramon specific plan area, or just the proposed amendment that received notification of the changes to the plan?
The notice is the 300-foot radius around the North Camino Ramon specific plan boundary.
Okay, so the entire plan, not just the one we're changing.
Correct, because there's an amendment that would apply to the entire plan area.
Great. Okay, thank you. And then the change to the park maintenance, and then there's a pretty thorough 450-page economic and fiscal impact analysis report attachment, highlighted the concern about the HOA, and it talked about the potential for the project going from positive to negative if the funding changes. Is it anticipated that we'll see a revision to that Sql analysis attachment, or how should we evaluate the park change now that the city is going to take over responsibility for maintaining the park?
So I can answer that one. The Sql analysis does not change whether it goes from public or private. In terms of the requirements for park maintenance and payment, over the last several years after the city adopted the citywide community facilities district, each project has prepared a fiscal analysis based on what the generated revenues associated with the project and expenditures. And the fiscal analysis that's currently provided is preliminary to provide a sense of the project proposal, whether or not that would result in a deficit or a surplus. Currently, it shows that there's a surplus, and in part because the park would have been maintained not by the city. If that park were to go to a public facility, the conditions of approval typically would require that a fiscal analysis be prepared prior to the final map adoption. And we would incorporate that analysis of the public park and what the associated maintenance costs would be to see if there is still a surplus remaining as part of the project. But the condition typically reads a fiscal analysis and participation in either CFD, lighting and landscape district, or other funding mechanism that would, if there was a deficit to the city, that would be required of the applicant to join into such a district.
I think I followed that. So maybe in my words, at some point the analysis will be done and it will conclude whether the project is fiscally positive, generating a surplus or a deficit for the city after all of the park decisions and potentially street aid decisions are made and finalized. So
that's right.
Okay. And then if there is going to be maybe this is down the road a bit, if there is going to be a community facility district to cover the additional costs, would the universe of affected residents be strictly these 404 homeowners, or would it be a larger geography that would be responsible for the public park at that point?
The CFD that would be associated with this project would only apply the assessment to the 404 units associated with this project.
And I'm assuming that would then cover any deficits generated by this park in particular, not just what we typically think of. I thought was fire and maintenance and police protection, and that's the CFD covers, but this will also cover the public park that will be also being created. Am I understanding this correctly?
So it's any costs associated to the city's services and facilities. So that wouldn't include the fire district. There's a separate district for that, but services associated with things traditionally like police services, park maintenance, street maintenance. If there were public streets, that would be included as part of the CFD calculation.
Okay. I think I follow that.
So let me just, Denise, did you want to comment? You put your hand up on this topic. No, down. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Did you want to say something about that topic? No.
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay. I think that was my questions for primarily Cindy and staff. Thank you.
Okay. Corey, do you have questions for applicants at this time?
No, thank you.
Okay. And likewise, I'm going to defer questions and comments to after the public comment. Oh, Eric, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Commissioner Wallace.
As I said, I deferred my questions to staff until after I finished with the applicant. I actually have a few softball questions for staff. The first one has to do with the sequence of events, plan amendment versus application. And my question is this. I'm assuming that the way this is structured is that hypothetically, if we recommend approval of the specific plan amendments to the council and the council accepts our recommendation and the changes are made to the specific plan, then we can proceed with the application itself for City Village. Is that right?
The development applications associated with the City Village, correct?
Okay, now here's my question. At that point, does SB 330 kick in?
Well, that one I probably have to defer to the city attorney's office.
All the softball questions, go to Ms. Boone.
Well, yeah, so, SB 330 doesn't apply to legislative actions, but it will apply to development proposal if they do the preliminary application. So they have a choice to do it at that time.
I'm sorry?
They have a choice to do it if they submit a preliminary development application, fulfilling the requirement for SB 330, and they would be subject to the hearing requirement if they choose to do that.
So would that be another application, a new one?
It would be something they would have to, I forget how they do it before, but they would have to submit that. That is a prerequisite. So they could use the existing as to show that they meet the requirements of the preliminary application. I think I feel like we've had a situation before where someone might have started off doing conceptual or a application, but then decided to do an SB 330 route and start filling out the preliminary development application.
Well, but as I understand it, SB 330 only applies if the application is for an area that's already zoned for housing, which this one currently isn't.
Once you have your specific plan amendment done, though, then the change has been made. Yes.
Right, and then so that's my question. Let me rephrase it this way. If the plan amendment is adopted, does the current application ipso facto trigger SB 330, or do some other steps have to be taken to fall under SB 330?
They still have to do their preliminary application that's required in their SB 330. I don't think they submitted that yet, as far as I understand.
Right. Okay.
There's no reason to submit that because they're not vesting anything that they're not already in process on. Question really would be whether the hearing limitation would apply at that point, and that's something we would have to look into.
Well, that's why I was bringing this all up, because it's SB 330 that triggers the maximum number of hearings, isn't it?
There's a difference between the preliminary application process and the maximum number of hearings. The preliminary application vests the fees and development rights at the time of the preliminary application. There's still a limitation on the number of hearings. We ran into that same question with the City Walk Master Plan, you might recall, because of the limitations on hearings, period, under SB 330.
Okay, but I think at least a portion of City Walk was already zoned for residential.
Correct. And in this case, once the specific plan is amended, it is correctly zoned.
Okay, all right. Well,
but again, we need to probably do a little additional research on this. I don't want to speculate on a series of events without having a little more background information.
Yeah, nor am I asking you to. I just wanted to put the issue on the table so we could get an answer to it. I had one more question for staff, and it's to Ms. Yee. And Commissioner Alpert brought up the financial analysis, and the revenue side of the equation was based on, for most part, on property tax revenue. I was like 57% of the revenue from the project area. My question is this: was the property tax estimates based on the current Bishop Ranch Master Tax Sharing Agreement?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Okay. So any other questions before we move on to public comment? They're clarifying for the applicant. Okay. Seeing none, then Jen, we will move on into public comment. So you have a reminder.
Thank you. So we did receive one late communication item from Jim Blickenstaff commenting on quality of life and park acreage. And this was provided to commissioners prior to tonight's meeting.
Correct.
And let's see here. As a reminder, for those who would like to speak, you can press the raise your hand button on your computer or *9 on your telephone to request to speak. And I will go ahead and look for raised hands at this moment.
I
we
see
have a couple.
We do.
Okay. All right. So if we could get a timer going here, once that's ready, I'll call on our first speaker. I'll give Lauren a minute to do that for me. All right, so I am going to go ahead and let me grab, hold on one second. We're going to grab, looks like Bill Clarkson here. You can speak whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I want to thank the Planning Commission for allowing me to speak before you. Our city has spent several years developing a vision for the walking district. In addition, the city went through an intense process last year in improving the City Walk project. The city has also held a couple of public charrettes to discuss the development and the refinement of the walking district and confirm the outlines of its boundary between Acosta Boulevard to the east, 680 to the west, Crow Canyon area to the north, and the Chevron campus in the south. BR6 sits right in the middle of the walking district. And to the east and to the west are office buildings. It will be the only residential link between the northern and southern halves of the walking district. BR6, as it's currently envisioned, and in the absence of a robust pathway comparable to the standards already established in City Walk, will seal off these two halves. BR6, when it was first presented to the Planning Commission, was done so in a concept review session. Yet the building site was presented in such detail that it appeared to box in the Planning Commission's ability to incorporate the walking district's concepts into the plan. The Bishop Ranch 6 project was presented to the Parks Commission, and it was rejected by its failure to incorporate elements into the walking district. The vote on this was 6-1. Yet the BR6 project continues to barrel ahead with apparent disregard to the vision of the walking district. At a minimum, I believe that this proposed project should be analyzed in detail to make sure that it has alignment with the vision of the walking district so that a thoughtful, well-reasoned decision can be rendered by the commission. We should keep in mind that changes to the North Camino Ramon specific plan requires a 4/5 vote of both the Planning Commission and the City Council to move forward. I make these comments with the note that I firmly support the housing numbers proposed in general. The housing numbers are not my concern here at all. My concern revolves around the integration of BR6 proposal into the walking district in such a way that the goals of the walking district are fully integrated. I urge the commission to be diligent in reviewing the City Village project with the same passion for the walking district that our city council demonstrated with City Walk. The walking district's concept is too important to our residents to be abandoned and by approving this project without a thorough review. And thank you for allowing me to read my comments into the record. I appreciate everything you guys do. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, it looks like we have Joyce Carr. I'll go ahead and allow you to speak whenever you are ready. You should be able to do so.
Good evening. My name is Joyce Carr. I have a concern that to this point I have not heard addressed concerning this project. And the concern is the severe drought and water crisis that we are going through at this time. That at this time, as the city considers building hundreds of housing units, and this is just one project. It's going in other projects too. It's been stated that East Bay Mud promises and is obligated to supply water to new structures inside East Bay Mud boundaries. But my question is, how will East Bay Mud be able to support water that doesn't exist? Excuse me, not support, supply water that doesn't exist. It appears that this water crisis will be getting worse and worse for quite a while. Ignoring this shortage of water and planning new housing units is not going to help anything. We think it's bad now. Wait and let's see what it is like in the future. Predictions are that it will get worse. I think that the city should be planning and thinking now very seriously about the water shortage, not about building all these hundreds and hundreds of new residential units. This is a quote that I find to be very true. Nature will have the final word. So what I would like to see is I would like to hear from the Planning Commission and also the other Summerhill and the other people that are involved in this project. What I would like to hear your comments about the drought that we're in and how that's going to play a big role, what role that's going to play, because I think it's going to play a big role in all these new developments that are planning to come up here in San Ramon. And I would request that the drought question be on the agenda for the next meeting or be part of the discussion for the next meeting. Thanks very much.
Thank you. All right, so our next speaker, it looks like, is a call-in speaker, and it is call-in user number 1. You can go ahead and speak now.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I just want to give a standing ovation to the commissioners. I believe it was Commissioner Marks for asking excellent questions regarding the Street A. That's a kind of commissioner that I know is protecting our city, and I'm really, really grateful for former Mayor Clarkson to chip in his wisdom. He's like a walking encyclopedia. And of course, our very respected Ms. Carr for putting in her comment about the water as well. I'm really, really grateful as a resident for everyone's input tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and through the chair, it looks like that was our last speaker.
Okay, very good. Then I will go ahead and close public comment at this time.
We do have Jerry who's raised his hand, but I think that's, I don't know if that's part of public comment or if he gets a rebuttal just as one of the applicants, so.
I was going to let him have a rebuttal, so.
Okay.
And I see Denise has raised her hand as well. So Jerry, would you like to?
Yes, thank you very much for allowing me to have a couple of comments. The first comment revolves around Commissioner Marks' concern or question around the specific plan amendment. If I'm not mistaken, I believe there were specific plan text amendments to the specific plan that were included in all of the documents that were supplied. So all of the text changes that were proposed are in the documents, and those were in the documents previously and are incorporated into the Sql analysis for this project. Not that not sure that they even affect the Sql document, but those written text changes to the specific plan were included in the report. Number two has to do with the walking district. One is, of course, the walking district's not been adopted yet. And I, assume it will be adopted, but it's not adopted yet. And it's not an official document that you can force a project at this stage to comply with a document that's not been fully adopted by the city. I will say, however, that as a representative for Sunset, that we have been and worked very closely with this applicant to ensure that this project embraces the walking district concepts and design elements. It is consistent with how we approach City Walk and the way it was going to be complementary and support the future desires of the walking district. This project is not a blockage to the walking district from the north to the south. It's actually quite porous and becomes a great connection. It provides the same type of connection on the perimeter along Camino Ramon and provides an internal connection through Street A that they've actually enhanced from comments from ARB and from the Parks Commission as it relates to the walking district. So I think it's a little unfair to say that it's a blockage because this project is quite porous and quite embracing of the walking district. for what is known in the walking district today. So I just wanted to put those out there, and I was a little confused that we didn't have that there was no there wasn't an understanding that there was written text on the specific plan amendment text changes. Thank you.
Commissioner Marks, you're on mute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jerry, I do understand that the proposed changes by Summerhill were included in the packet. In fact, they were in the previous packet, if I recall correctly, though not as extensively, in the July 6th. My point is the documents that we read don't even mention the Sql related documents in the appendix don't mention those specific changes. There has been no discussion by the Planning Commission about them. We've had no opportunity to. There's been no staff analysis of them. We have to not only understand what they are, but what is the impact of the rest of sub-area G? What is the rest of the North Camino Ramon specific plan impacts? We haven't talked about general plan consistency. Each one of those changes has to be found to be consistent with the general plan. You can't in a resolution say something is consistent with the general plan. You have to explain why. And so I'm not saying that Summerhill put forward or didn't put forward ideas. That's the applicant's sense of what we need to do. It is not necessarily the city's. And further, the Planning Commission hasn't been given a chance to say whether we have proposed changes or whether we agree with the proposed changes. My argument is not with what they propose. I think they're a pretty sensible group of land developers. It's a process question. You represent a big company. I assume at some point you have been challenged in court somewhere, sometime. I've been on the witness stand where somebody says, what's in the administrative record? And you have to say, well, we really didn't talk about it. And our documents don't talk about it. And we just sort of think they're minor changes. CEQA, under the section I cited, specifically says general plan changes and zoning ordinance changes need to be evaluated under CEQA. I think a checklist might even do the job, but I leave that to the staff to figure out. But so I'm not arguing that I'm surprised by what Summerhill wants. I just don't see this as meeting 3 on that particular point. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Mark. Denise, did you want to have a response?
Yes, thank you, Chair Kuznick. On the specific plan, again, just to reiterate, and I understand Commissioner Mark's comments, the majority of those changes really are limited to the project site and the interface. And then just to address the walking district, Summerhill has participated in the stakeholder meetings, and we have met with multiple stakeholders regarding the frontage along Camino Ramon, Norris Canyon, Executive Parkway, and including Street A. So really, we've provided a wide 8-foot walking path, meandering with lush landscaping and a generous setback, not only on the perimeter to implement the vision of the walking district, but also along Street A. So that we've created this nice walking loop, and with this, park being a nice interface and connectivity for that experience as well. So we have listened to comments and incorporated them into the plan. And as far as drought, again, we're using drought tolerant landscaping. East Bay Mud has provided a letter that they have capacity to provide water to the site. And again, we have water saving features throughout the site. I highlighted some of those in the original proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, commissioners, this is our time to have a robust discussion. However, it is 8:51, and would like to see if there is an interest in taking a quick, or not quick as needed, break. So unless someone objects, I'm going to suggest we take a 5-minute break. I'm at 8:51, so we're back at 8:56, and drink some water, and we'll be ready to take this on. All right? Okay, I'm going, and Jen, you will put up the appropriate screen. Okay, going on mute. Gary, you lost your background. Okay, it is 8:58, and I know Commissioner Alpert is working on his background, but I know he is present with us. So we are back, and commissioners, this is our time in which we can discuss elements of this proposal. The steps are to simply have a robust discussion, guide staff, and then we will continue on to additional meetings. So at this time, Corey, excuse me, I was reminded that I need to be more formal. So Commissioner Edwards, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to just take a moment and discuss this concept of what I'm frankly viewing as an end run around our inclusionary zoning ordinance. As I think just about everyone on this commission is aware, I was been the chair of the Housing Advisory Committee for several years. I was the chair when we passed the the inclusionary zoning ordinance. It is very important that we as a city, particularly as we're looking at RENA allocations, have a policy in place that causes and encourages affordable housing to actually be constructed. And it's also very important for us as a city to be a city that has certain expectations for the development community. I think that when Summerhill came into this project, they were aware of the inclusionary zoning ordinance, and I suspect that they made a very stark analysis of what that ordinance proposes versus what was in the specific plan to begin with. They've come forward with a plan to actually construct 20 affordable units. I think that we are doing the members of this city a disservice if we try to reach an agreement with Summerhill to allow them to fee out and build only 10 of those units. The $1.7 million that's being proposed, or $2 million is being proposed, gives the city a maximum of $200,000 per unit. I do not believe that it is fiscally possible in San Francisco Bay Area to actually build an affordable housing unit for $200,000. So if we take money instead of taking units, we're left with fewer units. We're doing the city a disservice in terms of failing to meet our RENA allocations, which has obvious impacts in terms of our city's ability to continue to have local control over our development process. And for those reasons, I'm really going to encourage my fellow commissioners to think about the value of 20 affordable units and how badly those units are actually needed, not just in our city, but also in our region.
Thank you. Extremely well articulated. Appreciate that. Commissioners? No additional discussion? Commissioner Wallace, thank you.
Right. Someone has to do it.
Yes.
I was at the same meeting Commissioner Edwards was. Well, I fully support affordable housing. I don't know that building $1 million units and calling them affordable really moves the ball very much. The reason that I was interested in finding out whether it was feasible or possible to have an in-lieu fee for some of the units, and I was really thinking about the lower cost units because the amount that we received, at least according to my envelope calculations, would be greater, was that not to build units, I don't disagree with Commissioner Edwards that $200,000 by themselves won't create much in the way of affordable units. But as we all know from a number of meetings we've attended, we have a number of units coming off the restricted list over the next couple of years. That money could be used to encourage the landlords to keep those units as below market rate. I thought at least justified exploring what we could do with the money, how much money we could get, which we now know, and what the money could give us. So at this point, I think that we owe it to our city to look at whether the use of the 1.7 million that basically is what Summerhill proposed would provide more in the way of affordable housing units than building another $10 million units. Leaving that aside for the moment, to me, the most important thing we can do tonight is to figure out what we want to do at the next meeting. There's been a couple of issues that have been raised tonight. Former Mayor Clarkson raised the issue of not consistency because the city walking district hasn't been, as I know, put into an ordinance, but how that it relates to the way that City Village is set up. Frankly, I haven't looked at it to see whether that's the case. I know that there are roads or walkways that are planned along Camino Ramon, so there is something like that. But I think that because it was raised, we deserve to look at that and come up with at least some tentative ideas whether the way City Village is structured is consistent. It doesn't have to be problematic, but at least the intent is consistent with the City Walking District and City Walk. The other things that Commissioner Marks raised had to do with how the specific plan relates to A, the general plan, and B, CEQA. Now, with respect to the former, consistency with the general plan, I actually think that given the limited number of proposed plan amendments, I believe there's about 20, it seems to me the most efficient way to deal with that would be for the staff to prepare a chart like they often do, which talks about what the amendment is and how it's consistent with the general plan. I'm somewhat familiar with the North Camino Ramon specific plan, and I am fairly confident that when you go through the proposed changes that are proposed specific plan, they would be consistent with General Plan 2035. But Commissioner Marks is right that one of the findings we have to make is the consistency between the two plans. And I think in this case, the mechanics of doing so are not very complicated. With respect to the CEQA issue, I confess I'm not a CEQA expert, but it seems to me that, as has been pointed out, most of the proposed amendments to the specific plan for this project deal directly with the project. There aren't very many changes proposed to the specifics plan that affect areas outside the project area, in which case I think it seems that the CEQA analysis regarding the specific project probably would apply to the changes as to those items. There are a couple of plan-wide amendments that are proposed, items 1 and 2 on the proposed amendments, but I'm not sure that in looking at them logically that either one of them causes sufficient enough concern to justify any analysis other than, as Commissioner Marks pointed out, maybe a checklist that there's no there that warrants a further review. So I think that our primary concern tonight ought to be to plan what exactly we're going to do next meeting so that the staff can go about planning and how we do it, because we've been going through meetings both on a less amended specific plan basis and secondly as an application. I think as far as the application goes, I think we're pretty far down the line on making a decision about that. The park issue, it seems to have been resolved, that it's going to be a turnkey project turned over to the city. That seems to suit the Parks Commission and presumably the City Council. There is somewhat of an issue on the affordable housing hybrid proposal, but that's something we can deal with. Other than that, other than the point that Bill Clarkson brought up tonight about the consistency with the walking district / city walk, I think most of the issues have been pretty well resolved, other than the issue about Street A that Commissioner Marks brought up tonight. And I believe that the representative from the applicant is going to enthrall us at the next meeting about insurance costs and coverages, put us all to sleep. But that's been, I think, covered. So it seems to me that my idea would be for staff, I'm sorry to put this on Cindy and Lauren, but what they think they need to come up with in terms of a checklist on what we should discuss at the next meeting, because I think we need to move ahead with more of the specific plan amendment, because essentially the application has to wait until the amendment is done. But I think that we need to come out with a checklist from staff as to these items we need to discuss and make a decision on to move forward on the amendment process. And I think, frankly, our time would be best served by doing that.
Thank you, Commissioner Wallace. Commissioner Alpert? Yes.
So just to dovetail, I think the best use of our time as well is to focus on the specific plan and what we need to do to make those changes. I know one of the findings we have to make is consistency, and I agree with Commissioners Wallace and Marks that it may just be a checklist that each of the proposed changes from Summerhill are consistent. But in addition, I think I read in the zoning ordinance that we should at least evaluate the public benefit of making a specific plan change. And I think the wording in the zoning ordinance was we should see a pros and cons document of making the changes to the specific plan. Just to echo, it just needs to be in writing, and we just need to have spent the time to do it. I don't think, as Commissioner Wallace said, reading the changes, they're very specific and targeted, and they seem relatively benign. But where I would be concerned is the importance of specific plans and how they come back to haunt us sometimes, and not to make a change to a specific plan without at least thoroughly vetting the changes necessary. Because I do believe that there are surrounding property owners that are watching how we are going to approach this change. And I just would like to make sure that we're completely thorough with that as possible. The other comments, as far as the project goes, I agree with Commissioner Wallace. I don't know that it's a good use of our time to keep talking about the project while we have the specific plan sort of looming over us. And I would actually propose putting it on hold until we get through the specific plan, with the exception of perhaps thoroughly vetting the park decision and the affordable housing, decision. But, I don't know that we need to spend a lot of time on that yet until the specific plan amendment is done. My other comments have actually been addressed in the questions from either myself or that, and primarily the fiscal viability of the city taking over the park. And Ms. Yee, I think, explained that it will be taken care of at some point down the road, to ensure that the project remains positive or at least not negative to the city. So I feel comfortable with that answer. And like Commissioner Wallace, I think it's important for us to at least look at the option of feeing out those 10 houses and learning what could actually be done with that money, and whether it would really make a positive influence on the 10 families, more than 10 families or not. But with utmost respect for Commissioner Edwards' experience and on this topic, we'll mean to want to just learn more before come back up with a final answer, in my opinion. That's my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Alpert. Commissioner Marks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to start and talk a little bit about how I got to where I am. And I don't start with a project review trying to figure out how to thwart it, but rather how to get to a yes, how to get to approval if I can, if it's reasonable. And one of the things that I have learned over the years is that process shapes outcomes. The more a process is shortened, the fewer the participants, the more the outcomes can be limited, and vice versa. I agree with the idea of meeting our housing needs and obligations as much as possible in the central core of the city and within the Bishop Ranch. And when this planning concept came before the Planning Commission, I voted to approve the required plan and zoning amendments. I voted to approve the 4,500 unit City Walk Master Plan, and I believe it was the right thing to do, and I would stand by that today. I agree with the proposal to convert the land uses on BR6 from office to residential, and I'm not looking to reduce units per se. I like the mix of housing and the type of housing, the middle housing that you're proposing. I think we need it in San Ramon, and I think it's overall a smart way to go with housing right now. Because this is a new neighborhood whose architectural style will not conflict with any other neighborhood, I did not and do not intend to offer any comments regarding architecture. I tend to be a bit sensitive about architecture that goes into an established neighborhood and is just oblivious to what's around it. That isn't the case here. In fact, you will be establishing context for anything that follows you. And I have to say, I appreciate and support the city's decision to make the proposed 2-acre park at the intersection of Exec Parkway and Camino Ramon a publicly owned and maintained park. I think that's a significant concession on the part of the city. It isn't necessarily a concession on the part of Summerhill, because either way, they were not going to own the park or maintain it, and they were going to ask to use public funds to construct it. But I do believe it's a smart concession on the part of the city, not only because the park will serve the residents, but you have, I've been told, between 20,000 and 30,000 employees who work in the park, in the business park, and they will have access to that. And it wouldn't be fair to tell the homeowners association of 404 units that the 20,000 or so employees have access to the park every day of the work week, and they get to pay the costs. And that is why I think it is a city obligation. It's unlike other parks in our city. For instance, how many employees go to Limerick Park during the workday to work out? They probably don't even know where it is. How many go to Boone Acres Park? They probably don't know where it is, but they will know where this park is. And the more people that use it, the more wear and tear on it, the more the costs go up. I want to talk about a little bit what I don't agree with. And this is a process issue that I'm still dealing with. And again, I really like the overall of this project. But number one, if you do the math, you have 31 acres, a little bit more. And during the first discussion we had with this in March, I pointed out that I thought there should be more interior open space. That I thought that at that point there wasn't any. You came back to the July meeting where we had a joint session with the City Council and the Planning Commission, and you had a 1/4 acre. That was really in a landscape area that was elongated by and widened by shortening some backyards that abutted up to it. But it's still only 20 or 0.25 of an acre. If you just take a look at the math here, 31 acres equals 1,350,360 square feet. You're offering 10,890 square feet for a tot lot. That's less than 1%. That's 0.008 for interior open space. I just, that bothers me. It's just very stingy in terms of the number of acres that are the private open space of the people who live there. You know, in this city, there are lots of homeowners associations, many of which don't have 404 units, that have a pool, several tennis courts, and a clubhouse. When we build apartment units in the city, we look for a pool, a tot lot, and usually some open space, maybe a clubhouse even. I'm not looking for all of that here. I do recognize the value of the 2 acres that will be there. But it just seems to me that's just very, very stingy in terms of the open space that the residents will have to use privately. Further, the one space that has been committed to a tot lot is really not very proximate to about half the project. It's way on the what I would call south side of the project. Well, not south. No, excuse me, the south side of the project. So why did I mention process? Here's what really I'm reacting to a little bit, and that is at the March meeting, one of the representatives from Summerhill told the commission that early on in discussions with the staff, Summerhill presented the staff several plan options, some of which included developing the project with significant open space on the interior. The staff advised them to place all of the open space in a park at the corner of Exec Parkway and Camino Ramon, and so they did. Further, the Planning Commission for that meeting did not receive concept review plans. We received a fully baked set of plans, the kind that you would get after concept decisions and after a Planning Commission had discussed something. The whole point of a concept review that we established several years ago was very early on in the process to allow the Planning Commission meaningful input into a proposed land use project at a point where the applicant was not so vested in the design that they have, not so encumbered by costs already spent, that they couldn't quickly and easily and inexpensively change the plan. But at the point that we got the March set of plans and every plan thereafter, even the cover sheet on those plans said final application plan or words to that effect. The Planning Commission essentially got left out of the concept review. It was held between the staff and the applicant. The concerns I have about interior open space, I would have brought up at the concept review meeting. And if the majority of the commission agreed, they would have been incorporated into the plans, and I wouldn't have any concerns left with this project. It would be an easy vote for me. But ever since, it's been a matter of final type plans coming in and no changes. And I'm sort of left as perhaps the odd man out, thinking that interior open space is important. It's important when you have little kids. It's important when you have several little kids and you can't get over to the other side of the world to go to the public park. That's a process issue. That's an issue where, had we been included at the very beginning, before all the costs were spent on developing these very well done plans. I mean, I can't argue with the quality of the work that's there. It's what you are proposing in the site plan, for me, that has been one of the sticking points. And so I would like to say that I really think you should go back and give us a bit more open space on the side of the project where you do not have a tot lot, where people are not required to travel so far to get to the tot lot if they want to have a more private area for their kids to play. I'm not per se looking for you to lose units. I don't work on that basis. 404 or 400 to me doesn't make much difference. What matters to me is that we create a good site plan, a site plan that works for the people. And the process that we have followed, in my opinion, has sort of left the Planning Commission out and sort of struggling ever since. I want to say that I think that the overall work that you have done, again, is beneficial to the city. I think that this is a smart plan in lots of ways. I like the housing that you are proposing. I am just greatly bothered by the fact that we had a concept review process, we got left out, and some of us never got to make some of the comments we thought we should. I even recall some comments by one of the commissioners about the 2-acre park, thinking there should have been other things there. And that person never got a chance to really build that into the project because things were baked by the time we saw it. So at the end of this meeting, I'm going to recommend some things that I would like us to take a look at in the future that hopefully will prevent concept review meetings being as off the mark as this one was. And I don't hold Summerhill responsible for that. I don't even hold the staff responsible for that per se. I think there's a hole in our process that the Planning Commission has to address so that in the future it's not left out of important land use planning issues. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Marks. I have comments as well, but I want to make sure everyone else has had the opportunity to share. So not seeing others. So I would like to, and thank you, Commissioner Marks, for saying this so well, because I have similar kinds of concerns. And I will say that I spent a great deal of my preparation time rereading and the North Camino Ramon specific plan. I wasn't on the commission when it was created. And so for me, I have to reread page by page and figure out what's going on. So my first concern as we look at specific plan amendments is, as I look at how it was drawn out in the specific plan, the specific plan isn't going to look like that at all once this one development is, if it's granted, okay, on subsection G4. Because you look at the way the North Camino Ramon specific plan was penciled out, it had an access point from Crook Canyon down to Norris Canyon, a wide, vibrant walking area there, and east-west streets. And I don't see how any of that will be valid going forward if you insert this housing unit where it is. And so for us to just be talking about amendments that will be related to this project doesn't seem like that is going to be robust enough. And I guess my point is that if these amendments approved, I feel like the rest of the plan is, I won't say worthless, but severely hindered in the way it was crafted at the time. I also want to say that to Mr. Commissioner Mark's point about the plans, in rereading the North Camino Ramon specific plan, it is very clear that walking and sidewalks and pedestrians are a priority. I mean, it spells it out. In fact, I actually copied the vision statement down so that I could reference it. So this then gets back to this issue of the walking district and how this particular development is laid out. I told the applicant in the very early meetings, I thought the park was in the wrong place. It doesn't seem to fit there in ways that I use parks or have used parks with children and just accessing public space. But I also want to say that I'm very concerned in today's items that this idea of the double row of trees along Camino Ramon and now Norris Canyon behind the curb can't happen because there's utilities problems. So I'm finding that, I'd like to see where we find these wandering paths that keep being described, because I look at what I have and all I see are very straight lines. I see walkways maybe by front yards, but I don't get a sense that this is part of a part of our town that embraces walking and pedestrian use. You put a sidewalk next to a street. I don't think that that is how I read the North Camino Marone specific plan vision for walking. And again, they talked about that the sidewalks needed to have an amenity zone, a pedestrian zone, and a flex zone. And they were very specific in the plan about topics like this. So, I mean, this is important, and those documents are still in effect. So those are some of the things that I have concerned. I support Commissioner Edwards in this issue about affordable housing. I do think that, if you build it, they will come. And that's what we're trying to do with the inclusionary housing. And to her point about, that this is what we say we needed. We went to the city council and they agreed. And so I think that is this is an important time for us as a city to actually follow through with what we said was important to us. So, those are my concerns. I think that I agree that we could spend most of our next meeting, and I hope someone will actually, we're going to make a motion here soon, but most of our next meeting in reference to this specific plan. And because right now, I don't know how it remains our specific plan if we don't have some additional adjustments to it. So those are some of my concerns. I'm very worried about this removal of large trees. I don't think most people who are hip to our meetings are aware that there are part of this proposal is requests for large tree removals, because we look at that area along Camino Ramon and the existing trees as part of what makes that a jewel currently. And to think that a whole lot of those trees are going to go is upsetting, and it will alter the flavor of what we're trying to create in this part of town on behalf of our citizens and going forward and families forward. So those are some of my concerns. I thank you for indulging me with what I had concerns over coming through. And I will say also that it was difficult to do significantly thorough vetting of all these pages of documents when we got them on a Friday and it was a 3-day weekend. So staff, if you could please not do that to us again, at least one of us would be very, very grateful going forward. So I say that parenthetically. All right, so commissioners, we are now probably unless someone has additional comments. Commissioner Marks, I think your hand was still up. I never know if I'm supposed to lower them or not. No, you want to?
I did. I said I had some final comments.
Okay, go. Thank you.
And they'll be brief.
Okay.
But I think that we need to develop some information. I think that with the staff, we should develop a handout to be given to any potential applicant who seeks a concept review meeting that describes in some detail what the submittal requirements must include, or the meeting will not take place. One should be a written narrative describing the proposed development and its key features. Second would be to require scaled 20 scale or 40 scale site plans options that locate the various land uses, streets, open spaces, and other important features of the plans. And then with each, the applicant's sense of the strengths and weaknesses of each option. Thirdly, I think there should be architectural sketches or photographs of built out other similar developments for us to take a look at. What is their thinking about what is an appropriate architectural design for that project, and give us the chance to give them some early feedback. And finally, there ought to be a statement on there on the handout that says, failure to provide what the Planning Commission requires in a timely manner will lead to postponement or cancellation of the meeting. And then there ought to be a signature line. The point is, it's unclear to me whether we have any written handout that we give to an applicant that tells them, this is what we're looking for. We're not looking for more than that. We're trying to preserve our ability early on, when you have not expended a lot of time and money, to have some input on what it is that we will be reviewing in detail downstream. If we have such a set of handouts, I'd like it to be given to us to take a look at and see if we all agree with this. Ultimately, the Planning Commission has the right to ask the staff for the information that it wants at a meeting, and at what meeting. And it's unclear to me that we have that now. Maybe in the past, other commissions haven't wanted it. I thought we were onto something when we set up these concept review meetings, but once again, getting a fully baked set of plans that is that thick as a concept review defeats the whole purpose of a concept review. And I think we need to convey to applicants early on, this is what we want. We don't want more than that, and we want it early. And if the rest of the commissioners agree with that, I would like to see that become an agenda item for us to discuss in the very near future. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Marks. Seeing no other hands go up, I would like to ask someone to make a motion that we direct staff as we have so noted for tonight.
I would be happy to make a motion, but I would first want to query staff about whether they think they have enough direction for the next meeting. I mean, there's certain specific items that I think that we need to discuss. I mean, at the top of my list would be, we need to sit down and go through the proposed amendments to the specific plan. I think in order to do that, we need to have some type of chart that talks about the consistency between the amendments and the general plan. I know that Chair Kuznick has expressed concerns about this particular project and these amendments impacting the rest of the specific plan. I've mentioned that in the past. I don't know whether it's possible to really have a robust discussion at that time, but I would certainly be open to having at least a preliminary discussion. It may not be necessary in order to decide on the specific plan amendments, but I never thought that taking one block of the specific plan at a time and put blinders on as to what the impact could be on the rest of the specific plan was a good idea, particularly when our economic analysis, to me, suggests, in fact, we've had people at in this conference say that they don't think that the mixed use and retail component of the specific plan is really feasible in going forward. But I would propose that we continue the hearing on the proposed amendments to the North Camino Ramon specific plan relative to the city village project to September 21st, with the proviso that at that time we at least have something that indicates whether those amendments are consistent with the general plan, so we actually can have a meaningful discussion on that particular subject, because as Commissioner Marks pointed out, that is a finding that we have to make. And I think Commissioner Alpert also brought up that these findings have to include some type of benefit analysis pursuant to the zoning ordinance. So I think that's what our next meeting should be directed to, is to let's get to the chase and talk about these amendments and vet them one way or the other. So that's my motion.
Could you please repeat that?
I know, it's a good thing it's being recorded.
I will second Commissioner Wallace's motion, and on my comment is I agree. I would like to really focus on the specific plan amendment changes and all of the steps and findings and analysis necessary to move that part of this overall effort forward.
All right. So we have a motion and we have a second.
I will do a roll call vote. We had Mover, Commissioner Wallace.
Aye.
Seconder, Vice Chair Alper.
Aye.
Commissioner Edwards.
Aye.
Commissioner Marks.
Aye.
And Chair Kuznick.
Aye.
Thank you. Item 9.2 is continued to September 21st.
Very good. All right. Thank you, one and all. And we appreciate staff's hard work, and we know they will come back equally well prepared with what we need from you. So thank you so much for your efforts. We are moving on to, let me see, where's my agenda? Sorry. I turned page. Item 10, which is no new items in the public hearing. Non-public hearing action items, there are none. Study sessions, liaison reports. So do any of the commissioners have a liaison update for us? Commissioner Alpert.
So the meeting just happened to hit Tuesday of a week where there are two committees that I attend. Tomorrow is EDAC, but on Thursday is ARB with a very full agenda. And just by way of coming attractions eventually back to us, they'll be looking at the Belmont Village, the residential care facility that we had a concept review back a couple of months ago. And then secondly, they're going to be looking at what's been named Windflower Fields Townhomes at the Golden Skate property. And that is a townhome project of 47 units. So the ARB will be looking at that on Thursday. And then a third one is some remodeling and rebuilding of some of the buildings at the laborers training facility. Someplace that we will never probably get a chance to see because it's behind fences and gates, but they're looking at that on Thursday as well.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Any other? I know transportation has not met yet, so I have nothing for transportation committee. Okay. Seeing no other liaison reports, we will move to Mr. Barr. Updates for
Couple of things.
Okay.
Obviously, on the September 21st, we'll be bringing back BR6 as motioned and accepted. In addition, we have a concept review for 2481 Deerwood. This is a site on the west end of Deerwood, and that's Deerwood Drive. I'm sorry. We did a concept review several years ago for some single-family lots there. You may recall this is a commercial building surrounded by residential. And so we have another group looking at a townhome project for that site. And so we'll be bringing that forward. And in addition, we have another concept review for the Morgan's Masonry site, also a townhome project. And so we'll be bringing you some information and asking for feedback for both staff and the applicant. In addition, I wanted to mention that on September 9th, there will be a workshop on the general plan, housing element and climate action plan. This is a Zoom meeting, webinar-based meeting, 7 p.m. The links are on the web page. And again, we'll be doing some outreach to the public at large, introducing them to the process that we're going through and soliciting feedback and essentially participation going forward. So we are also going to be reaching out to EDAC tomorrow, as well as many of the committees over the next several weeks. And so you'll likely see us with our roadshow in the next few weeks to come.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. We look forward to some really interesting developments coming down the road. All right. For the good of the order, do we have anything else? Everybody looks like you are ready. So I will adjourn the meeting at 9:41. Thank you, commissioners and staff and participants and attendees. We appreciate your time with us. So thank you very much. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.